Welcome to Conversations in the Coop. I'm your host, Trinity Director of Athletics, Drew Galbraith. It's my pleasure to be joined in today's conversation by Peter Cannon from the Trinity men's lacrosse team. Peter, thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me.
So let's talk a little bit about your journey as we have these conversations with lots of students in your class in particular. Your start at Trinity was different. You moved in, you were in a lot of times in your own bedroom for all of your first year. Came in that COVID fall, and now you kind of come out the other side and kind of get the full gamut of the college experience, right? From starting there till finishing where you are now. But the first place to start with you, Peter, is how does a kid from Houston, Texas, end up playing lacrosse in Connecticut?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of like a messy journey, I guess, because like obviously lacrosse is not the biggest sport, especially in Houston, so it was kind of weird in high school. Like I played competitive lacrosse, but spring and fall and like summer could be sort of all over the place. Like tournaments were up on the East Coast or like further up in like upstate New York, and so traveling was kind of a mess. Getting recruited was kind of a mess. Like it was not an easy process to get there, and so I think for a while I almost decided that I didn't want to do it, and I had kind of pulled back from the whole recruiting process. So I actually never ended up committing here or anywhere else for lacrosse, and then decided Trinity was where I wanted to be, and like lacrosse was what I wanted to play in college, and so came here with the hopes of being able to try out for the team and just give it a shot and hopefully be able to like make it on the roster and go from there.
So let's talk about that. Growing up in Houston, you've got an older brother. Your family's very associated with St. John's School, which is a private school in the Houston area. So when you're growing up there, where does lacrosse even kind of come from? Like where was maybe the first time you were exposed to it? Because St. John's is known as one of those private schools in Houston that churns out lots of great athletes in every sport.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the first exposure I had to lacrosse was my mother is from Virginia originally. And lacrosse is obviously a lot bigger there. And our neighbor and family friend from like the same town in Virginia where my mother was from was a coach of a club team and talked my older brother into it in like maybe his 5th grade year. Mm-hmm. And I was always sort of just doing whatever my older brother did. I sort of followed his kind of path. So once he started playing lacrosse, I immediately got into it and sort of just went from there. And the private school is where most of lacrosse was in Houston anyways, so it helped being at St. John's that there was like opportunity to play for like my school team and have like good coaching and other good players around me and good competition.
So when you're coming up through a school like St. John's, which is this isn't one of these 6A schools in Texas that's massive, right? Everybody kind of knows everybody. Your mom worked at the school. Your dad went to the school and I guess now works in alumni relations at the school. Your grandfather's a headmaster there. So a lot of tight ties at St. John's. Now you're coming up playing lacrosse. Was that viewed as a little bit of the outsider sport at St. John's or no?
I would say that it wasn't so much. I think maybe before my time it might have, but by the time like I got to high school, it was decently popular, and it helped that a solid amount of kids, especially in my class, played lacrosse. So I think a lot of my friends also played it, so I never thought kind of like second about it. I never was like, oh, I should play baseball because baseball is bigger in Texas than lacrosse is. I had plenty of friends and classmates that were into lacrosse, so it made it easier for me to kind of commit to that sport.
So as you're growing with the sport, and much like everything else, you kind of get to a point where is there enough in Houston for you from a club standpoint? So what's the next step? If you're in Houston and you really want to excel with the game, where do you go?
I mean, a lot of the opportunity comes in Dallas. There's a lot of teams that are like more solid there than they are in Houston. Houston club has like a lot of turnover. One year there might be a good team with good coaching, and then the next year it falls apart because like a couple people left, and then everyone sort of goes their own direction. So for the majority of my time, I played with maybe a team in Houston, then also would travel with like a team that was based out of Dallas, but kind of drew players from all over the state and would just sort of throw us out on a field together somewhere in like Maryland or in like Long Island or something.
So talk about that traveling as you're, I'm imagining like late middle school, high school, you're starting to do all this travel around the country. How was that for you? How was that for your family, your parents?
It was definitely, it could be a lot at times. We got pretty good at it. It was mostly myself and my dad who were doing the traveling. So we got a pretty good routine going of getting up to these tournaments that were happening like up on the East Coast. But it could definitely be a lot, like going from Friday class, getting on a plane, flying in like late Friday night somewhere random and kind of like middle of nowhere, like countryside of the East Coast, and then going playing 2 days of a tournament, sat like 4 games on Saturday, 3 games on Sunday, getting on a plane, going home and starting class like 8 a.m. the next morning. It was definitely exhausting, and I think was one of the reasons why there was a point where I wasn't sure if lacrosse was like the next step, because it could be so much. Like I was pushing so hard to try and get recruited and traveling so much, and like my dad and I were going all over the place that it got to be pretty difficult. And then I realized that I still love the sport, so I decided to keep playing. But
Well, we'll talk about that. So your senior spring is kind of the world shutdown moment in
Mhm.
March of 2020. So you got options. You've got a couple schools on the East Coast. You've got Texas, which is obviously a
Yes.
huge draw, great school in your state. How was that thought process and decision-making process 4 years
Mhm.
ago in the spring?
Well, like I mentioned earlier that I follow my brother's path a lot, and he had kind of been in a similar boat where he loved lacrosse but wasn't sure that that was definitely what he needed to do like in his next step. So he went about the process of finding a school that he wanted to go to, and then if lacrosse was an option there, trying to make that happen. So when I was applying, I applied to some schools where I knew lacrosse was definitely more of an option, and then other schools like Texas where it was really just a club sport. And then everything shut down a couple games into our senior season, and that was when I sort of realized like I still love playing, I still want to play, and like there's no way that I'm giving up now. So I applied to Trinity, had gotten in, and sort of decided to go there hoping that lacrosse might become an option for me here. And I think maybe if COVID hadn't happened, things would have been different, but I think it would just help me realize how much I love playing and how I wanted to continue to play and like my next steps beyond high school.
So that first year, you tried out and got cut, but stayed on, had the opportunity to stay on as a manager, and in some of those first couple games, there was a couple of waves of COVID ripping through the team, and got the chance to get out there with a stick and run around in practices. What was that like for you?
It was definitely it was kind of discouraging at first. I mean, like obviously, I like had confidence enough to try out, but was like nervous about getting cut. And when it happened, I was definitely like pretty sad because it was what I wanted to do, and I was kind of worried that might be the end for me. But I built a really strong relationship with a lot of the guys in my class on the team, and decided that either way I wanted to be around all of them, and like if the only way I could contribute was throwing in the ball in drills and filling up water, that would be what I was doing. And then obviously a lot of guys got COVID. Asked Coach Tarnow if I could still practice, knowing that there were now no number issues with COVID,
Right.
having so many guys out, and kind of there was nothing to lose. It was less stressful than tryouts have been because I'd already was cut, so I was sort of like, it's a lot easier to play when there's no like target on your back, and it ended up going well, and they just sort of let me keep practicing. So.
And then that summer after your first year is when you really committed to kind of weight training and getting some of the weight that you lost during COVID back, and that seemed to kind of springboard you forward going ahead, right?
Yeah, it definitely helped. I mean, I knew that going into sophomore year there were going to be another round of cuts, even for returning players, so I was definitely like kind of make or break. I had to kind of earn a spot on the team. So I was working construction that summer anyways, so I was out in the heat, like doing physical labor all day. And I would go from like 6 a.m. to 3 o'clock on a construction site, and then I had one friend who was also playing Division III lacrosse at RPI, and he would bang on my front door. I'd be sleeping on a sofa after work. When he got off at 5, he'd come, he'd bang on the front door, and we'd go to the gym for a couple hours. And because a big part of the coaches had emphasized for me was putting on weight. I was still skinny, but was extra skinny back then. So I was making a big effort to do that, and we would just get in the weight room all the time. And we're trying to work with each other since there's not a lot of lacrosse to play, especially after high school in Texas. And that was sort of the main focus, was just doing whatever we could to like help our teams.
You mentioned that the bond you have with your classmates. Talk a little bit about that, especially like reflecting almost on 4 years of it now. It's extra tight. It seems to be extra tight with a lot of Trinity's groups of seniors. Maybe because of what you went through your first year, but also just what you've been through together. Just talk about that group.
Yeah, I think COVID and that first year of college definitely had a huge impact on us just as a class, because there was so little that you could do socially. Like, just being able to hang out with people was like a huge win. So I think we definitely didn't take any time together for granted, and I think there was a lot of like outside distractions, but there was nothing that we could do about it. So as a group, we kind of just got used to being like, this is what we have going, like we have each other, and that's sort of the only thing we can control at this point. And I think that's true for a lot of people in our class that are on other sports teams and other groups. And I think that's been sort of a common factor that has pulled everyone in the senior class together, but especially on the lacrosse team, that like through the thick and thin of the past 4 years, like we've all been able to be there for each other. And there's been so much crazy stuff that's happened, and every time like we've been able to fall back on like those relationships that we've built. So I think honestly, like my roommates and my classmates now are probably the most positive thing that I've gotten out of my time at Trinity. Like of all the things that I've done here, I think like that's going to be the best, longest lasting thing that I've done.
Do you think that bond has helped your class kind of shift the culture of the team as well? Because it's noticeable to those of us outside the team, and it's really this class that's had such a big impact on doing that.
I think it definitely has. Like I mentioned that like all we had was each other, and like our freshman year we didn't really get a bond with the rest of the team, and sophomore year was somewhat normal, but still every once in a while there was hiccups. And I think we sort of had the time and like we're around each other enough to be on the same page in just about every aspect. And like we kept that going throughout the years. And last year we ended up starting the season with 4 total seniors. So we basically were like the surrogate senior class, having been the only ones that have been around for more than a year. And I think as a group, just being on the same page at all times and being able to like communicate so well and understand each other so well, we've been able to kind of mesh together, and everyone's got their own individual role in the team. But I think having such a well-knit senior class has made it easier for everyone on the roster to be able to like focus in on a singular goal. And I think without all of us as a group, it just wouldn't have been possible for us to do that.
I'm going to ask you to be a little selfish right now. When you reflect back on it, because it's a really neat story, from maybe going to play, maybe not going to play in college, to graduating team leader, like what's that message that you would tell someone who's thinking about maybe hanging it up, or in any sport? I mean, really, it could be any athlete, but you know, the value that you've gotten out of sticking with it and kind of running the full gamut.
I mean, I think like if I had to tell someone who was kind of in a similar boat, it would definitely be to like not give up and to keep going, because like I think one of the better things I've done is having pushed myself like this. It definitely was not easy, especially in that first year, to be a manager and try and go from a manager to making the team, and going from being the last guy on the roster to now playing and being a captain. It's been sort of a long journey, and I think it's helped me kind of learn things about myself. And so like we've had kids in the past couple of years who have been walking on, and it's definitely not easy. Like we have a big roster with a lot of talented players on it, and they've sort of been in similar boats where they were kind of like discouraged. They weren't sure if it was going to work, and I was like, just keep showing up till they make you stop, because that's what I did. And like if you really want to play, that's the only thing you can do. Like there's nothing you can control about how people like perceive you, but if you just keep going, at some point they either have to take you or tell you to go home. So
it's a great message. So what's next? You graduate this spring, and it's okay that not everything is written in stone. So what's next? Because you've already shown the ability to adapt to the situation and figure something out. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me a lot of graduating high school. I wasn't exactly sure what would happen, if college was even going to happen for like a freshman year. A lot of schools were deferring people. So I don't have a job yet lined up, working on it, but I'm not too stressed about it. I'm sure that something will fall at some point. You know, like maybe grad school, if that's. I mean, I have an extra year of eligibility
Right.
thanks to COVID. So if that becomes an option, I mean, I love lacrosse. I'd love to keep playing. So maybe I would do that. But honestly, I'm ready for anything. You know, there's nothing set in stone, which is kind of stressful, but it's also kind of exciting to not know what that next step is going to be yet. So.
Well, we're rooting for you and your teammates for the rest of the season, and just excited to see how this journey ends at Trinity.
Definitely, yeah.
Peter Cannon, thank you.
Thank
That'll
you.
do it for this conversation in the Coop. For all this news, scores, and schedules, go to bantamsports.com. Follow us on social at Bantam Sports. Until next time.